take your time out to say a special good morning to one and all. Those of you listening to Classic Radio, 105.5, 105.9. A special good morning also those of you who are viewing us via GBN TV. What is Channel 7, Channel 11, Channel 20. Good morning. You're certainly welcome to be part of To The Point program this morning. And certainly hope all is well with everyone who are listening and viewing. Let me say good morning to my guests. We have, of course, Minister Dennis Cornwall this morning. He's the Minister of Finance. Let me say good morning to you, sir, and welcome back, I should say, To The Point. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, GT, and elated to be back with you again for another session of To The Point. I think we have good things to talk about. So
Yes, we certainly will be.
Right.
Certainly will be. All right. Our focus of our conversation this morning, we're talking a whole lot of post-burial. We will have some conversation also as relates to the supplementary budgets. Of course, it's still in the minds of lots of individuals, of course, who have listened to the last parliamentary session. But let's kick it off for this morning, of course, with your constituency, St. Patrick's, of course, didn't feel the heavy blunt as the sister as of Carriacou and P.T. Martinique in force of Hurricane Beryl, but there were some damages sustained. St. Mark also got some damages. Tell us about the how are things in St. Patrick's as relates to post-Hurricane Beryl?
Okay, GT, I think I should start by saying that since the passage of Beryl on July 1st, a number of things has happened in the parish of St. Patrick, and I'm talking about St. Patrick East and West, because I need to sort of identify those two constituencies. We are aware right now that the areas on Grenada that was actually significantly affected by Beryl was St. Patrick, some parts of St. Mark's, some parts of St. Andrews, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Carriacou and Petit Martinique is far different to the kind of damage that we receive on Grenada. Notwithstanding, we cannot forget St. Patrick East and West, St. Mark's, and St. Andrews. Now, we have also announced that the major areas that were affected were housing, agriculture, and infrastructure to some extent. So since then, we have been in train to basically make sure we can rebuild Grenada in a better way. I also want to link to all of that the CREF funds that we have received via the payment of the insurance, because most of the insurance that we had with CREF SPC actually was triggered. And we also received from our friendly governments, donor agents and so on, some form of grant. Now, you may hear outside that a lot of people are talking about, the hurricane passed on the 1st, and almost 2 months gone, and we have done nothing, and people are not seeing nothing happening on the ground. And, we need to basically take care of the people who are badly needed and so on. I don't have a difficulty in hearing the stories and say, you have a point, but everything has a process.
Yeah.
We couldn't spend one penny out of CREF funds or the grants that we receive and so on without bringing them in to the system via a supplemental budget. In other words, yes, the funds were deposited in the consolidated fund, but to actually spend that money, we had to get the parliamentary approval via the supplemental budget to be able to do that. So I want to basically just, tone down the people out there who are making the noise and say that, we are taking too long to get things done. Things don't happen before the time. And if you go about doing things before the time, there are consequences also, because you could be charged with issues of non-compliance of the financial rules that you are obligated to follow and so on. So in that case, I would say that we are very much on time in doing what we are doing, and therefore the noise in the market out there should be quelled once and for all.
All right. But I understand, you will understand the concerns of individuals, Minister. Folks may have lost their home, of course, some of their personal belongings. So they would like to know how things are processing for them, especially those who may not be capable of replenishing it on in a timely manner themselves. You understand, and who may be looking out for the assistance of government in some way or the other. So it would leave them to a bit of want to know what's going on. If you
yes, well, I believe that yes, anxiety, people's not knowing what to do next could be a concern for everybody, and I'm not trying to be naive about that. But what I'm trying to say to the people who are basically urging or pushing or talking about striking and taking the streets and so on, sometimes they are doing so without having the kind of knowledge that they should have, because again, everything takes a process.
Right.
You couldn't basically go ahead and spend, as I said, without having parliamentary approval for it. And having said that, we have gotten approval from Parliament in the Law House sometime last week. And as such, we have put plans in place while that was going on to take care of all the matters that we think that would be available at this point in time. So, for example, we know that the housing situation in St. Patrick after the passage of Hurricane Beryl is dire. And we have already done research to find out everyone who has lost a roof or window or house, whatever damage they would have received and so on. We would have actually collated that information. So we know who are the ones who are affected. Okay. We also know in the case of farmers and so on, whose farmers' property were affected and the kind of damage that they receive and so on. And I think in the case of Ministry of Agriculture, they would have started already making plans to at least give the farmers some kind of relief, albeit not to compensate them for every damage that they would have incurred, but at least to put some monies in their hand to basically allow them to start the process. There are those out there who are believing that the process that we took to basically do that is not adequate or not proper. I would say put yourself in our shoes and understand what we have. With limited resources and to make sure that we can reach out as far as possible to thousands of farmers outside there, whether it be the short crop, the long-term crop farmers, the persons who are rearing animals, the people who are basically doing the CMOS business, and on and on and on. Even the people who are doing the hatcheries and so on for chicken and other type of plants that they would create for the agriculture purpose and so on, they too have been catered for, and I'm saying that they would be benefiting for something. But again, our resources are not infinite, and we give what we think we can give based on the discussions that we've had and the research that we have done. In the case of the housing, we have put in place the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation to basically lead in terms of implementing that part of the relief. And as such, MIT would have had consultation with the households thus far. They would have also had discussions with the contractors, the plumbers, electricians, and those type of people who are involved in the construction sector. And so I think very soon, we will be able to start rolling out the housing program in St. Patrick, St. Mark's, and elsewhere in the country where there were damages. Now, Carriacou also will benefit from the housing program that we talked about. Carriacou has resources made available under the program or the supplemental budget to make sure they take care of Carriacou also. Now, I also want to dispel something that is out there. There are people who believe that the government has sufficient monies to build back a house for everybody who would have lost their house and so on. And I'm saying that is not correct. The government is going to be helping as far as possible persons who are unable to at least rebuild their buildings or their houses or homes or whatever it is and so on. And we have actually taken several initiatives to make sure that that could happen. There are those who would be required to pay for the housing, even if government or the private sector would have been involved in building it. They would have to pay for the residents. There are some persons who would not be able to build a house at all. Government would have to take care of that. There are those persons who would have had insurance on their properties and so on. They would have to claim their insurance on their property and do the rebuilding. But government, as I said, will try and make some effort to assist where possible. Yeah. Again, government does not have all the resources in the world to basically give everybody a house, because that is impossible. Nowhere in the world you have a situation where a government, after a disaster, rebuild everybody's property, because again, we have to be mindful that government has to take care of the infrastructure, which is the road, the bridges, the schools, the medical centers, and much, much, much more. So we have to basically balance what we can do in a public way as well as what we can do for the private persons who would have been affected.
When you spoke of the housing assistance program, let's focus a wee bit on St. Patrick's. How is this process going to be rolled out?
Well, we have already, as I said, collated the number of persons, the names, contact numbers of those persons and so on. And we would have basically done some initial contact with them.
Okay.
So apart from having the names and the contacts and whatever it is and so on, these persons would probably have to go through what they call a means test, because we'd have people on the ground, which we have done already, to go there and see what sort of property the person had on the ground. If it's a property that should be insured, well, we expect that person to have an insurance. If it's somebody that did not have a proper home, they might have something they're living in and so on, it was not proper. That person is, let's say, considered to be among the poor and vulnerable group in the country. We would have to deal with them separately to other persons who basically have some kind of means. Now, you may hear stories out there, well, the country is damaged and so on, people don't have a job, they don't have a salary. That's not the case, because government have not ceased paying all the persons who have been paid by the government. So persons are continue getting their salaries and so on. These persons can definitely, as they would have done initially, gone to the financial institutions, the credit unions, the banks and so on, get a loan and put something together wherever they could. We expect these people to at least continue on that path. We have spoken to the banks, the credit unions, in one way through the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, to allow for the extended moratorium, just as we did in the COVID, to allow persons to basically defer their payments, but at the same time that would help them use whatever facility to rebuild their homes and so on. You would have also heard that we have given several phases of incentives in terms of waiver of VAT, CT, CSC, another type of tax to allow persons to be able to purchase the materials to rebuild the home and so on. And that is continuing until maybe the end of 2025, thereabout and so on. So we are not saying that everybody would rush right now and do those kind of things, but there is sufficient time for them to basically take advantage of the tax break that we have given them to be able to allow them to do that.
A question I would like to ask, because you didn't mention it, but I'm just looking for a bit of a clarification. Does the government will be having a particular, should I say, a material program, especially for folks who, as you mentioned there, in the poor and vulnerable stages? Will the government be having a material program that provided maybe free material, or to persons, or maybe would they have to purchase it for sale?
Well, as we speak, government program in terms of housing repairs has continued. It has never stopped. So you would see, for example, while I'm talking here right now, I'm telling you that the MIT managed housing program after burial has not yet started and so on. But you would see in the communities, we have continued to actually assist people in putting their house together. Right. So I have seen on one radio station that they have posted a house that we built for somebody under that program, and they call it a box. You know, I'm always very fascinated about these things, you know. You don't have somebody put out their hand and they give you something and so on, and then it becomes a talking point, you know, that it's a box and how the people go turn in there and so on. You had nothing and you get something. Be thankful, be grateful. Somebody else is paying for that. If it's not the person themselves, some taxpayer is paying for that, because we as a government cannot do anything without collecting tax from the public. Right. Some people pay tax, some don't pay tax. And we try to basically balance the act by giving assistance to those who could not help themselves. So I am saying that housing assistance has never stopped. It continued, and it continued even while I'm speaking right now, even before the burial portion of the housing activities has started. So there are activities going on right now in the housing sector.
All right, great. Happy to know that. I wanted to just show that as we of course talking in terms of assistance. We know that there is a $25 million that was placed in the supplementary for should I say let me get that right for it. It's supplement for GDB to issue loans to businesses affected by burial. What is the criteria for these loans, and how can people start to apply?
Okay. So as you rightly said, the government in its wisdom has put aside $25 million EC dollars at the Grenada Development Bank to assist the resuscitation of businesses in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Now, these monies are basically there to assist the business sector, basically in the retail sector, fishing, whatever sector that might be able to benefit from it, because you might have a business that requires additional funding. The funding that we have placed at GDB is expected to be disbursed part grant and part loan. Okay. We have already said that the conditions for the loan would be very generous. In other words, very concessional. You have at least 1 year grace period, meaning that even you get the money disbursed this year and so on, you don't have to pay until a year later. It's over 1% interest. It's a 10-year duration of that loan, so it means you have time to basically take your time and pay back that loan. Some persons might be able to at least take advantage of it immediately. Some persons might have to reconsider, if I do that, what other things I may have to do to make sure that my business can get back on track. So, yes, as I speak, the GDP is basically working out the semantics in terms of, and they probably should have been doing that right now, to make sure that they can deliver to the business community who require that kind of funding to make sure that the business can continue. Yeah. Now, there's another story out there which I find very, interesting. Government put money into GDP, and there are persons out there who are saying that this money is put there for the politicians and the ministers to go there and take loans. As far as I know, government has always put monies in GDP, even by the former administration, to build houses for persons who are on contract. You didn't hear those stories and so on, but now you're hearing those stories that they put it in there for people like my colleagues to go and take monies and so on. That is absolute nonsense, And I think they are using a clause in one of the agreements with the bank and CDB, where it says that money is put in the bank by CDB and so on are not there for people like the politicians to take from it and so on. These are specific programs and rules that they put in there. Yeah. But GDP was basically created to provide small businesses, medium businesses with funding to be sure that they can carry on their business. It has not said anything about government officials cannot borrow money from the GDP.
So you're saying that I've heard the story been going around myself. So you're saying in the laws or the clause within the GDP, there's nothing that says that a government minister cannot purchase or get a loan from GDP.
Right. But with the arrangement with CDB, which is a major funder of GDP, there is a clause in the agreement which talks about, how do you deal with politicians and their families and ministers and those things. But that is not the general rule of GDP.
Okay. Well, I'm happy for that clarification, because I think it's one of the reasons, folks, that the conversation continue to roll on, because there's never been a general, conversation that's really to clarify this whole issue. So you continue to, so I'm happy that you offer some clarification to that this morning. Speaking about GDP also, there's been an announcement about you just mentioned it a while ago when you spoke about the grant as well. How is this expected to work? And when I expect to work, the amount of grant that will affect how persons are affected by that.
Well, the loan grant component of the facility, that is left up to the GDP to determine how much of the grant that they would give to the customer who comes in and so on. Yeah. And those kind of monies, we expect the persons to basically use to offset some of the future debt payments that they have on hand right now. Because right now, we know sometimes the business might be down for whatever reason and so on.
Okay.
So in order to keep your loan current, that grant element they give you and so on will take you maybe about 6 months payment, right, or maybe 3 months payment thereabout, and depend on the condition that the person is facing and so on. But again, it's a component of the amount of loan that you take. Right. So if you say, for example, you're taking $20,000 and let's say 10% of that or 5% of that is considered to be the grant, that will be given to you.
All right. Minister, we drew for a break. When we come back, I want us to get into the supplementary estimates and get based on some highlights and a few questions related to that as we move forward. Exactly. Stay with us, folks. It's To The Point, Classic Radio, GBN TV. We'll be right back. Don't touch it now.
Thursday afternoon in a 60 zone. This 34-year-old motorcyclist was on his way home. It's our job to work out why he never got there. The rider broke his neck on impact here, having crashed into this car that was turning right. By analysing the impact, we know he hit the car at 30 kilometres per hour. And these marks on the road tell us that he skidded for 21 metres, having braked hard here. When he first reacted, he was doing 68. But let's change one small thing. At 60, the driver would have had more chance to see him properly. He'd have stayed in control and reached this point a moment later. The car would have cleared his path and he'd be home by now. You decide on your speed. The physics decides whether you live or die.
Get ready for non-stop cricket excitement as GBN brings you live coverage of this year's Republic Bank Caribbean Premier League. Please note there will be some adjustments to our regular programming lineup. On Tuesday, September 10th through Friday, September 13th, transitions will be at 5:05 p.m. GBN television news will air at 6 p.m., followed by a repeat right after the CPL match. And don't miss the rebroadcast of transitions after the news repeat. GBN with you anywhere and everywhere with the best in sports coverage. Stay tuned and stay informed with GBN.
A hurricane is more than just a storm. So when a hurricane is coming, please prepare your home. You can do this by having an emergency kit ready, covering your windows, trimming your trees, clearing your gutters, reinforcing your garage doors, installing a generator, and knowing your evacuation routes. Failing to do so can lead to immense damage to your home. Thank you, and please stay safe this hurricane season.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, viewers, once again to The Point here on Classic Radio GBN TV. With us this morning, we have an MP, of course, Dennis Cornwall with us this morning. He's the Minister of Finance. And welcome back once again, Minister Cornwall.
Thank you.
Our next segment of the conversation, I'm going to speak a wee bit about the supplementary budget. Before we get into what is the actual cost of damages sustained as a result of Beryl? If you could answer that for me, sir.
Well, we have indicated elsewhere that about 33% of the country's GDP has been wiped out as a result of Hurricane Beryl. Grenada's GDP in terms of dollar value is somewhere in the region of $3 billion, right? So I'm saying safely that we probably would need about $1 billion EC dollars to recover Grenada to its state prior to Hurricane Beryl. Now, you would hear people talking about we received so much monies outside the CREEF payment and grants and so on. We know for a fact that we received $118 million plus from the CREEF payment and about just under $8 million EC from persons who would have donated after Beryl. So that, in a sense, I cannot say that is sufficient funds to rebuild Grenada in its entirety. We have to look at other instruments that we may have to at least move into sometime later to basically rebuild Grenada. Yeah. Because we have infrastructure to take care of, we have the farming community to take care of, we have the schools to take care of, the health issues and so on, plus the housing in Grenada. And that costs monies. We also, which we have not mentioned much about, Carriacou for the entire period remaining in this year plus maybe the whole of next year is not likely to be paying tax. So obviously we are losing somewhere in the region of $150 million per year in tax for only Carriacou. The question is, where does government get the additional resources to be able to do what it requires to do on an annual basis? Yes, we have funds coming in from the CBI program, which again has to be utilized as part of the rebuilding process. But at the same time, if you may recall that the CBI has two components. One is attached to the approved projects, meaning those projects like the hotels that we have actually been constructing around Grenada, the Six Senses, the Intercontinental, the Grenada National Resort up in Lever, all is CBI funding. Some of those, the majority of it, is going towards those. Then we have what is called the National Transformation Fund. That is where, for example, the persons are paying government after they would have received the documents saying that they are considered to be a resident of the country, they do have to pay a sum of money, and that is what goes into the consolidated fund, yes, but not, the NTF, which is the National Transformation Fund. Now, just piggybacking on what the National Transformation Fund has been doing for us. In the last budget, we talked about government putting aside 10% of that funding at a rainy day fund at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. When I last looked at the balance on that fund, it's somewhere in the region of almost just under $40 million right now. Because the last time we reported about it, it was 30-something million, but I guess funds continue to go into the account, so it would be close to $40 million. Now, you would hear out there that the last administration talked about putting aside 40% of that fund for that particular purpose and so on. I must tell you that not one damn penny was put aside by the former administration on that. They would have talked about it, but they did not put any mechanism in place to put that aside. So when you hear talking about, we moved from 40% to 10%, I want to tell them, and I will tell them, that stop mamagaing the people outside. There was not one penny put aside in a form that you can see, you can go back and fall back on in the event of a disaster like we're having right now. Currently, if we want to use the 40 million that we have put aside thus far in the hurricane relief measures and so on, we could, because we have put aside that fund at the central bank, managed by the central bank, a committee, and that is in place right now. We can use that funds. If we did not do that, we had nothing to turn back to at this point in time.
All right, understandably so. Now, tell me how much revenue? Of course, how revenue? How much revenue we would say that government expenditure to forego from the incentive of the of the rollout from Beryl?
For Carriacou alone, we know it's about $150 million, and that could be verified with the Inland Revenue Department, who knows what sort of contribution Carriacou and Petit Martin makes in the overall revenue scheme and so on. It might be slightly higher than that because if you take into consideration the impact of St. Patrick and St. Mark's and some places in land use, it could be a bit more than that.
Okay. Now, my next question going to roll out to this in particular. It speaks of the maybe you can give an explanation on this. There's been much talk about, if I could say it like that, but funds allocated in the supplementary budget to, of course, the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation. Can you explain to the public why 15 million, of course, was assigned to MIT for housing and not the Ministry of Housing?
Okay. Well, as I said before, that government has various ministries and departments that are assigned to do certain things. Government alone cannot rebuild everything that is expected to be rebuilt out there. So we'd have to depend on the private sector. We have to basically put dedicated measures and procedures in place to deal with some of the expenditures. So take, for example, the same $15 million that you said was assigned to MIT to manage, rebuild the housing stock in St. Patrick's and Max and other areas in Grenada and so on. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. Because MIT is not expected to go out there and put hammers to nail and galvanize and so on to actually build it. What MIT is going to be doing is basically mobilizing the contractors, the other technicians in the construction sector, be it the plumbers, the electricians, the masons, the carpenters and so on, and to make sure that every house that we assign to a contractor is being done in a particular way, and that we get value for money from that exercise.
All right. Because
now, let me go with one other point, because I've heard it talk about on there that who gave MIT the authority, or where did MIT get the authority to be able to at least get involved in building, and whether or not MIT is a authorized, parliamentary approved ministry. I would say to you, yes. Because MIT did not come on board because of Beryl. MIT was in place since the government came into office and so on. Several budgets has gone to Parliament thus far where allocations were approved for MIT to operate as a ministry. So stop the nonsense out there. MIT is a legitimate ministry, and that should be put to rest.
Yeah. All right. Now, keeping it at that split, could you just give an explanation in terms of that 50 million assigned to MIT, and of course it indicates that it used to build, let's say, if I could, that 15 million is used to build 200 houses. That's what's indicated in one of the items.
Again, in the explanation that we had in the supplementary along that line item is to talk about rebuilding 200 houses and so on.
Yeah.
We also made a notion that maybe a house could cost about $50,000. But you have to take into consideration other things apart from just saying $50,000 for a house. The terrain in Grenada is all about the place. You have highlands, you have lowlands, you have semi-hilly lands and so on. And some of these things will take much more than what we said as a notional figure for rebuilding a house. So, for example, $50,000 we anticipate would be a notional figure for a house.
Right.
But it could lead to maybe $60,000, $70,000 based on the terrain that you're building on. You as a private person and so on, when you have to build a house and so on, if the terrain is abnormal or very hilly, you have to excavate.
Yeah.
How do you get that done?
That's additional cost.
Additional cost. But we may not say that is going to be added to every house and so on. Some houses might be straightforward. You build it on flatlands, the house existed and so on, it maybe need a roof. It may not need the $50,000 either.
All right.
So let us not play with the maths outside here. I know some people want to go the route of, the maths and so on. The maths is damn maths in. You need resources to build back the houses. So I want to rest that case also.
All right. Now tell me, there's in the supplementary budget, it had 18.6 million allocated for replenish of the constituency fund. Tell me, the explanation is that the document indicates 18 million were used for burial. Can you explain the area in which that 18.6 million was spent on?
Okay, so every budget cycle or every budget under the Finance Management Act that we have in place, we are required to put aside 2% of total revenue for contingency purpose, meaning disasters, emergencies that may occur from time to time. It could be heavy rain, it could be high winds, it could be fires like we had in the drought period last year. So that $18 million was provided in the budget for 2024. When burial hit us, we had to reallocate those $18 million to the various ministries and departments to allow them to basically take care of certain expenditure that was not foreseen. They came on board. So, for example, I know ministries like Ministry of Infrastructure got, I think, $3 million. There's another ministry that got $3 million. Ministry of Finance got $1 million. And it goes on and on. This is something that we had programmed in the 24 budget. Now, having used that because of burial, we also had to replenish that monies should in case another disaster strike us for the remainder of the year. So that $18.6 million that you see that we have provided for under the Ministry of Finance is to take care of that should in case we have another disaster going on.
Okay. No, in the supplement also added at 30.1 million more to the recurrent expenditure. Is it 30.1 million? So I'm saying now the supplement added at 31 million more to the recurrent expenditure. With our local revenues, I would say, will be able to sustain the increase. Of course, when it comes to as a CBI revenues, or that is unreliable and expected to reduce. Okay,
so let me say that if you look at the total size of the supplemental budget, it's 269 million plus, thereabout, and so on. Some people like to make reference to the CRIF insurance payment.
Yeah.
That was $118 million. If you take 118 from $269 million, you're still left with a sizable amount of millions of dollars that has to come from local revenue.
Yes.
Right? I would tell you also that the supplemental budget catered for $31 million for recurrent costs, over 230-something million for capital local cost, and another 5 million plus for grants in there and so on. Now, we have already said before that any money that is received by government by the way of grant or insurance or whatever means and so on, it has to be placed in the consolidated fund. So offsetting what the CRIF payments were, we still had to find a significant amount of monies from the consolidated fund to basically really be able to at least provide for the proposed expenditure in the supplemental budget. So we are using CBA funds, we are using local revenue. We're still paying our salaries and other wages and so on, and we have been doing it on time. So the question is, we are doing a damn good job despite the challenges that we are faced with.
All right. Well, certainly, of course, our listeners of you will be happy to hear that. Now, another question that came to mind for me, of course, going through the supplements and listening to other concerns. Now, for the period January to June of 2024, that was a major report shows that a growing recurrent expenditure relative to unmoved capital expenditure. Now, the report also shows a contract of and in the construction sector, I would say. Are there any concerns there? Do you have any concerns there, sir?
Well, to repeat what you said, from January to June 2024, the economy was doing pretty well. I mean, that's coming off the last IMF report they did on the country. We continue to do well in terms of performance. Now, an event as Hurricane Beryl, which brought all the speed to our country in one day, it's a couple of hours and so on. We anticipate that there would be some fallouts. So take, for example, agriculture sector will not be expected to provide a significant growth to the GDP at this point in time. In fact, we have to discount agriculture to a large extent because there is no nutmeg going out, there is no bananas out there. The cocoa is down. Everything that is related to agriculture is down at the moment and so on. So we have to now turn around and spend monies to basically rebuild that agriculture sector. Some people may say, oh, we are not doing sufficient for it and so on, but again, everything is relative. You have to have resources to do it. And I don't pretend to tell people that the government of Grenada has all the resources in the world to do everything that everybody wants out there to do.
It's impossible.
Right? But on the other side, for example, we would expect construction to kick up, meaning that construction will make a larger contribution to the GDP because there is much more materials and so on, housing materials to be bought. There would be also more persons employed in the construction sector to make sure we can do what we have to do. Right. So there would be up and down. I still believe at the end of the day, we would see a lower growth rate for 2024 and probably 2025, it might be lower than what was predicted. But at the end of the day, Grenada continues to at least do what it has to do to make sure we can revive and to make sure that Grenada can stay afloat.
I want to also ask this question as we go. We still think about Hurricane Beryl and specifically for Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Why is there no specific mention, I would say, for housing support in the supplement related to Carriacou and Petit Martinique?
Well, that is not totally true. Because if my memory serves me well, there's in excess of $18 million in the budget specifically for dealing with the housing issues in Carriacou. There are funds in the budget, in that supplemental budget also, under Ministry of Climate Change, I think it is, to deal with all the issues.
I was more looking for it under the Carriacou and Petit Martinique.
No, you wouldn't find it.
I wouldn't find it. It's not there.
But not Solid Waste Management Authority has been given substantial resources to continue help doing the cleanup and so on. And it's no secret. The amount of debris we have in Carriacou and so on, there is no place to put that debris. We would have to ship that debris out of Carriacou to give some space to allow things to rebuild in the way we want it to. Yeah. There are talks about we put the debris on the playing fields and so on. That is a temporary situation because there is nowhere else to put it. If you put it on the current dump site or the landfill site, it would be a nightmare for us to remove that to basically take off the steel and the galvanized and the nails and other debris to put in a barge to take it elsewhere and so on. So we have to be mindful of those things. People ought to understand some of the premature statements that they have been making. It makes no sense. It doesn't help.
All right.
It doesn't help.
But so we drew for a break once again. We have just around 15 to 20 minutes, I should say, around 15 minutes or so left on the program this morning. We may have to grab an additional 5 minutes because I know there are listeners and viewers that may have a question or two for you, and I do have a few more questions that I may like to ask also. Let's take that break, and we're coming right back. Stay with us, folks. It's To The Point.
Rennick & Thompson, in collaboration with Mafas Limited, presents high-yielding techniques and technologies.
Get ready for non-stop cricket excitement as GBN brings you live coverage of this year's Republic Bank Caribbean Premier League. Please note there will be some adjustments to our regular programming lineup. On Tuesday, September 10th through Friday, September 13th, transitions will be at 5:05 p.m. GBN television news will air at 6 p.m., followed by a repeat right after the CPL match. And don't miss the rebroadcast of transitions after the news repeat. GBN with you anywhere and everywhere with the best in sports coverage. Stay tuned and stay informed with GBN.
A hurricane is more than just a storm. So when a hurricane is coming, please prepare your home. You can do this by having an emergency kit ready, covering your windows, trimming your trees, clearing your gutters, reinforcing your garage doors, installing a generator, and knowing your evacuation routes. Failing to do so can lead to immense damage to your home. Thank you, and please stay safe this hurricane season.
Let's go back. We were live there, of course. If you saw, of course, myself and the MP having a bit of off-air discussion there. Welcome back to the program once again. But so let's continue on the trend of our conversation this morning. A slight deviation a wee bit this morning. Now, the government announced the implementation of a new pension arrangement on October 1st, in October 4 should be on October 1st. 20. Can you give a description how this pension expected to work?
Well, I am aware that as part of the regularization process, the government is intended to bring on stream a new pension program for persons who are considered to be on contracts, temporary for several years and so on. And that would be a pension scheme that is part paid by the workers and part paid by the government of Grenada. So it's a contributed type of pension scheme, and not a defined benefit, because there's a defined benefit pension plan as pertained in the public service emanating from the 1958 Pension Act, which where government foot the entire bill. NIS is similar to the defined contribution bill pension, whereby persons actually have to contribute to NIS as well as the government to ensure that the person get a pension at the end of the day. Yeah. But those type of pension scheme more or less favored the persons who are considered to be employees that were permanent in the public service.
Okay.
Persons who were on contract for the last, let's say, 10 years, 15 years, because there are people who have been on contract for all those years. They will not guarantee a pension when they leave work. They terminate the work today, they go home, they get whatever payment that they had in salary, and that was the end of it. We are saying we're trying to at least address that situation by providing an arrangement through a pension scheme to allow these persons to benefit from a pension at the end of the day. In addition to that, if that particular worker moves from one job to another, that pension is carried with him, right? So it is beneficial for the persons who are currently asked to basically be part of that pension scheme.
Was the unions part of this pension discussion?
I am not too sure to what extent or to the details of the consultation between the unions, but I do know that there was some level of consultations along the way.
All right. Now, last Friday I had the president of the teachers union here on the program, and of course he spoke about teachers not receiving salaries for the month of March. Mm-hmm. And what do you say, of course, on this particular challenge here?
Well, what I can say is that from time to time you may have a situation where there are changes in a particular teacher situation. I mean, I remember when I joined the teaching service back in the days and so on. it took me practically 6 months before I got my first salary. Now, I'm not saying that should be the norm, because we have come a long way in terms of making sure that the public sector salaries are paid. Maybe up to 99% of the public service is paid on a timely basis. But from time to time, you may have a case like this. Somebody's position might be slightly changed because of some changes in the employment. The process has to go between Ministry of Education, the ministry who is basically preparing those things. It has to get approval from the Department of, DPMS, DPA, sorry,
okay.
Not DPMS, something else. And the Public Service Commission to basically confirm that everything is in order basically to pay that person. So from time to time, you may have some slight delays, but it's not enough. Right. I mean, and I think it's unfair that some person take a one-off situation or those things that probably happens from time to time and make it a big issue. Ask the same persons who are talking about that, how long ago in the operations of Grenada that some person would have gotten paid late. It happened now. It happened in the former administration for many years. And they cannot dispute that because I could tell them I was one who was a teacher that got paid 6 months after I started teaching. They can refute that.
All right. Tell me this, sir. I know that the government is currently negotiating the promise pay and grade review for the police officers. What is the cost implication of this? Would it be back to the 1995 as promised on the campaign, or what is expected to take? When is this promise to take effect?
Okay, I would want to basically be careful with that because I'm not part of the negotiating body. Okay. I'm not part of the committee. I am not yet informed as to what stage you're at in terms of the negotiations, so I do not want to pronounce anything here that would basically come back to haunt me at the end of the day. So I prefer leave it up to the committee that is dealing with that to handle that particular question. All
right. And don't forget to our listeners and viewers, if you do have a question or two you may like to ask Minister Cornwall, feel free to do so. In this segment, 435-2041, you can call via the WhatsApp or you can call me directly, 435-2041. Minister, this other question. We're still in the year of independence celebration. How much funds has been expended so far?
Okay, so I know we have provided the committee that was created for the independence celebration.
Yeah.
We have announced early o'clock that this would be a year-long activity. There will be several components of activities, including the inaugural celebration, the independence celebration, the parish celebrations, including those that we have had already, St. Patrick, St. Mark, St. Andrews. St. David's is upcoming just now because they have not had their chances yet. A number of issues. Even, for example, the Cornwall $50 note that was created, that was all part and parcel of the activities and so on. Now, a question was raised at Parliament asking for the expenditure on those things. And I'm saying that while I believe that the question is a valid one, I cannot give premature answers to the question because, again, I would have to go to the AOC, that is the organizing committee that was set up to basically run the independence activities. They would have to provide me with an audited financial statement as to the amount of monies that they would have received. I anticipate that I don't expect them to basically go over budget, but they have to be the ones providing us with that information so that I can report to the Parliament in a proper way. Right. Without that information, I would not be able to report. Right. And I've said that before. I wouldn't put my neck on the block and talk about things that I don't know about.
Understandably so. We do have our first caller online. Caller, good morning, you're live and welcome.
Good morning, greetings to your guests. A couple of things here. First, to the minister, I say, sir, I sat here and heard on various occasions members of the opposition criticizing the expenditures proposed in the supplementary budget. However, you, a couple of minutes ago, sat there and told the Grenadian people that that they, quote unquote, would have spoken about it. What do you expect me to understand by that, sir? Is this a manipulation, or is it that you clearly do not understand what would have the participle says? If it would have happened, it didn't. But I'm telling you that I heard it and other Grenadians heard it too. So please pay attention for what it's worth. 2, as it relates to the duplication, unnecessary, immoral duplication of government services, the MIT ministry that was formed, headed by an incompetent, inept improvisionist, have been granted a whole load of money to build houses. Where is the National Ministry of Housing and the established National Housing Authority? Couldn't they have hired the engineering staff and the workmanship, the craftsmanship to get the building of these houses done, even by means of additional employment? Why this money had to be deviated from its normal sources to go there? Kindly convince this nation that this was not an irresponsible, unnecessary duplication of ministerial services. 3, and finally, you spoke of the lending of governments of the monies from the National Development Bank, and that the guidelines of the bank, local bank, does not say anything about lending monies to politicians and their families and so on. But the suppliers of the funds, the CDB, does have certain legislation or regulation, should I say, on it. Can you read the part? This is what I'm begging. Today you may not be able to, but I wish next time you come back, you read the part of the regulations from the CDB to the people. Let us see if in fact it is quite permissible for our local entity to breach what the CDB says in order to facilitate things to their own people. Thank you very much for what it's worth. Have a nice day. Will you, sir?
So, caller, I would want to start by saying you and any other persons are entitled to your opinions. And as such, I would not basically join you to basically spread misinformation and propaganda on some of the issues. Take, for example, you talk about duplication in the supplemental estimate. I don't believe that there is any duplication in the supplemental estimate. We have provided funds on the various ministry and departments to take care of certain aspects of the relief and rebuilding of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. If your opinion is duplication, I cannot help correct that one because that's your opinion. With respect to what you said about the GDB, I said that the GDB is funded from 2 sources. The Caribbean Development Bank is one of the entities that provide funding to GDB to be carried out in the manner and according to the agreement that is in place. In that agreement, yes, it is stated that funds that are placed in GDB should not be utilized by a minister or politician. But the rules governing the bank never said so. Government, from time to time, put local revenues in the GDB for on-lending to the population and so on. There is no restriction on that as far as I'm concerned. So if you do have that piece of legislation that says differently, then fine, let us have it. But I don't believe I can agree with you to make those misinformation that you have just given the public.
All right. Caller, good morning. You're welcome, and you're live.
Good morning, GT and the Minister. I'd like to go straight to the point. I was hoping that the next meeting of the Cabinet that they take in consideration the bus service that was pushed back for the seniors and disabled. If you can subsidize these people who's well needed to support transportation in the next budget for their seniors and disabled members of the community and the people of the government, when you get old, you'll need transportation. We cannot afford it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Thank you so much. 4352041. I'm not sure if you got.
No, I wouldn't want to comment on that because the Ministry of Transportation is basically in the process of basically trying to negotiate with the bus service in the country to make sure they can put things in place that deals with all the areas that it needs to be dealt with. That is including the students, the elderly, the possibility of being able to get a bus to take you home after work and all those things. Issues are, for example, where the price of fares bus should be at this point in time. Even another matters that I have not had the chance to basically look into, but I know that they are working on it, and sometime soon they would be able to make a pronouncement based on the agreement between the bus association and the government of Grenada.
Okay, great. Caller, good morning. You're live.
Hello?
Caller, if you need to go live. Please have whatever device you have in the background turned off completely, please, before we move forward. Go right ahead, please, caller.
Hello?
Caller, go right ahead, please.
Yes, the minister in his response to you used the word damn about 3 times. Now,
Caller, before you continue, would you lower whatever device you have in the background, please?
all right.
Let's move on from this caller. 435-2041, 435-2041. I understand, but you can hear us, of course, quite clearly via the telephone, so no need to have your radio or television turned up as a mean of monitoring. You can hear me on the telephone. Minister, before we move on, I have a question I didn't get to ask, and let me see if I can throw this one at you. Now, with the amendment of the procurement law to increase the threshold from 15,000 to 100,000 for tendering, has this increased the ability for government to issue more contracts? Of course, in the process of issuing contracts, the cost below 100,000.
Okay, so the amendment that was made to the procurement bill, simply changed the figures that were in there, $15,000 to $100,000. All other items in that bill remain as was.
Okay.
So, for example, it says in the case of an emergency, government can sole source a contractor. It doesn't mean that that person should be a friend or family of the government, because under the old act, it basically remained just as it was. And therefore, I want to dispel this myth out there that people are saying that because we increase the procurement amounts from 15,000 to 100,000, would allow for ministers and for malpractice under the procurement bill. Tendering process is also still there, and there is specific reasons or conditions under which tender take place under the Procurement Act.
Okay.
So then nothing has changed except the figures from 15,000 to 100,000.
All right. Well, the question is, has government been able to, of course, get more contracts?
Let me tell you what I think is happening. In today's world in Grenada, tell me what can you do in terms of a infrastructural type or building type project you could get for $15,000. I mean, yes, you're talking about you might have been able to do a box drain and so on for $15,000 back then.
Yeah.
Go to the suppliers of building materials and so on, see how much you can basically get for $15,000 today, plus add labor and so on to that, and see if that is making sense. So it has been removed from $15,000 to $100,000 to create better efficiencies and to basically eliminate some of the persons who are so-called contractors, because we have, after when everybody became a contractor and so on, and everybody did all kind of things, that's why we're having a problem still. Nobody follows the rules and the regulations and so on with respect to construction. I've seen a road on the West Coast for over a year or two in the same condition because the person who had been given that contract probably didn't have the wherewithal to basically have that contract completed and so on during the time. And therefore, we have to be very careful when we see those things and so on, because to me, moving the figure from 15,000 to 100,000 does not mean that it would increase corruption, as people are claiming.
All right. Now, my final question to you, because we are a little bit over time already. Now, the Ministry of Finance and ID in particular has issued a notice for a new and increased property tax. Are we expected to expect an increase in property tax for 2025? Are we expecting that?
Well, I don't think the statement is correct to say that Ministry of Finance has issued notice for increased property tax. What I do know is that there was a process not too long ago where we had do a revaluation of all the properties in Grenada.
Yeah.
Now, having done that, and as we know, property values have increased throughout Grenada. There might be a lot of reasons why property values is going up. Now, if you apply the same rates that currently exist and so on, obviously the expected payment required would be more. I have not sat in cabinet and deliberate on any increase in property tax to anybody in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. In fact,
even with the new revaluation?
Even with the new revaluation. Because again, for us to be able to do that, we have to have some consultation or some process whereby we basically determine whether or not what we're asking joint public to pay is reasonable. Take, for example, for 2025 in Carriacou, there will be no property tax applied to the entire island of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, right? Demand notice for 2024 would have gone out. And I mean, if you know how the process works, there is a process whereby if you pay early, you get a 5% discount and so on. So that part of it, I could say 2024 went out. But in there, I don't believe there was any provisions for increasing property tax.
All right. You mentioned that property tax for Carriacou and Pitimagli. But do you think 1 year will be efficient for that? And notice it, folks, you think we get all the folks rebuilding?
Remember what I said earlier on. Government depends on revenue to run this country.
Yeah.
Because the same persons who will tell you, well, that's too short, run it until 27 and so on. Where they expect the government to get money to pay salaries and all those things and so on, and to pay it on time and all those things. So we have to be careful. We cannot have our kick and eat it, We have to bear in mind, government need resources to run this country and to run it properly. If we don't have it, we can't run it.
All right. Mr. Cornwall, I want to thank you for being with us this morning. Interesting conversation. Of course, we could go on all morning and talking a whole lot. It's always interesting having a conversation with you. Anything in closing before we take a wrap this morning?
Well, GT, thank you for inviting me again to the point, to at least try and educate the public on a number of issues that we have been hearing bouncing around outside here, whether it's correctly or not, or maybe it's a notion that that's what's happening. And I'm always available, as I said, to basically try and clarify where I could and so on. I am not the depository of knowledge on every matter in Grenada. But where I can basically clarify some issues, I'll be always willing to come and explain to the general public. Thank you.
All right. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. And I will, of course, encourage you to have a great day for the rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
All right. Hey, folks, as we take a wrap for this edition of To The Point for today, this Wednesday, the 11th day of September, join us again tomorrow for another edition. Have yourself a good one, folks, and goodbye.